Hello, no kako. This is Kenson again coming to you from the beautiful island of Maui in the middle of the Pacific. Well, you can see it's a blank screen. There's no title, but I just wanted to let you know I appreciate you being here for this lesson because we're going to talk about something that I think is relevant to most of you, if not all of you. And I'm talking about an event that happened several years ago that just changed the world. I mean, it was so drastic that it was as if somebody just flipped the switch, and then the whole world went crazy. And this is what we're going to talk about. And and if you don't agree with me that the world has gone crazy, then maybe this is not something you'll be interested in watching. But if you agree with me that yes, the last several years have been strange, then stay with me because I think you might find it interesting. But this is just the first part because here we will establish the problem of what's been happening, and then in the second part, I'm going to explain through scripture why of of what's been happening. So this will be in part two. But what a story that I learned as a kid uh, really illustrates the situation that we're in today. And that story, of course, is the emperor's new clothes. And I remember watching a television show about this, black and white days, But it's a story, of course, that you might know of an emperor who was vain, who was very self-centered, and he liked to have the best. And these two young men in his realm, they figured out a way to get money from him by pretending to be tailors and telling him that uh, they had magical thread that nobody could see that the outfits except only the smartest people could see this thing. And so they went to the emperor and they explained this to him, and in his vanity he said, I'd like you to make an outfit fit for me because I would like a magical outfit, the most beautiful in the land, as you're saying. And they said, great. And they went off and they came back a few days later carrying a chest. They opened it up, and both of them reached in together as if to bring out something, that was beautiful and extravagant. And they held it up before the emperor's eyes. And to his surprise, he couldn't see a thing, you know. But in his vanity, he couldn't admit that because they had told him that only the most intelligent people could see it. So instead of saying the truth that there's nothing there, he he he, he began to uh, describe it as a beautiful outfit, the most beautiful that he had ever seen. And so he tells the tailors, well, help me to put it on. And so they tell him, well, you're going to have to take all your clothes off. And he does. And then they go through the pantomime of putting on these things, the various parts of this outfit until he's completely clothed in this magical outfit that he thinks. And so they bring the mirror, and he stands there looking in the mirror, and what does he see? He just sees this old guy completely naked standing there, But again, he doesn't want to reveal or say that he doesn't see anything because of the repercussions that maybe he's stupid and that's why. So he calls his servants in, his cook and his wait staff and all the other people, and they come into the room and they're shocked because standing in front of them is their boss, their ruler, completely naked. And then the tailors tell them, what do you think about the king's outfit? Because it is a magical outfit that only the most intelligent people can see. And they start stuttering and stumbling over themselves, and they finally say, well, your Highness, it's beautiful and it's gorgeous. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever put on. And of course, the king at first is gone thinking, wow, these guys are smarter than me because they can see it and I can't. But then he has this the stupidest idea. He says, you know what, let's make a parade and I'll go down into the town and see all my subjects down there. They can see this wonderful outfit that these two great tailors have made for me. So they arranged for him to have this parade. And so as this cartoon shows, there he is walking stark naked, and the people are lining the streets, and most of them are shocked, and their eyes are huge, and the men are putting their hands on their mouth to stifle their laughter. The women are fainting and turning red, embarrassment for him. But because they know that only the most intelligent can see it, nobody wants to say they can't see it, and so they all go along with it, and they start complimenting how beautiful it is, and oh, Your Highness, it's the best thing you've ever worn, kind of thing, until this one little kid comes up, and the kid points his finger, and he says, the emperor has no clothes, and he speaks the truth. And what happens? Does the emperor, hide himself and stuff? No, the guards come, and they begin to try to shut him down, and in our vernacular, cancel him. Well, this little children's story is kind of a description of what's going on in our world today. We have this thing that's happening in our world that the elites are telling us we need to believe in. This is the truth, and if you don't believe this, then you're just a conspiracist, and you're basically a treasonous, and nobody wants to be accused or slandered and things, so everybody goes along with this thing, and they're saying, well, the elite, these guys in charge, they must know this thing is real. Well, what's happening in our world today is we have this conflict. It's a conflict between truth and lies. And in a more spiritual and cosmic way of describing it, it's the conflict between light and darkness. It's an age-old conflict. It began in the very beginning. And so that's what's happening in our time. And that's what makes it so crazy and insane, that those of us who can see the truth of it, we can't speak the truth because the authorities are going to come down on us, and we're going to be canceled, fired, demeaned, and slandered, and all of these things. So most of us, we see what's happening, but we keep quiet. You know, I just watched a movie. It's a animated feature, and it's very well done. But the reason I watched it is because when my boys were young, they would play this game on Nintendo, and it didn't make sense to me. Of course, the game. It's called Mario Brothers, and I would watch them playing. I would see these two funny guys with big mustaches, going through this game, jumping up and down and all kinds of things. But I never understood, what the point of that game was. And so when this movie came out, I thought maybe I should watch it because it can maybe educate me on this game. So I watched it, and I saw the whole movie. And when it finished, I still was confused. I thought, what? I don't understand why this thing is so popular. Why this game was so popular. But I did. It was worth my time to watch it, because in the middle of that movie, one of the characters in the movie, not the main characters, but one of these side characters, says the most profound thing that describes what's going on in this world. And I thought, what an interesting thing that this profound statement comes out in this, almost like a children's movie, you know, uh, or at least people who like video games. But it comes out in this movie. Maybe because the writer who put that line in there was afraid to speak it out in real life. And so he puts it in this movie, and he makes this little star character say it. When this character says, in an insane world, it is the sane that are called crazy. Again, let me read it. In an insane world, it is the sane that are called crazy. And that's kind of like what's going on in this world. And so I Googled this statement. And I thought, where did they get this from, And it actually comes from something that Mr. Spock in Star Trek said. I don't remember him saying it in the movie, but maybe in one of the TV episodes. But Mr. Spock said it. And before him, the author, Kurt Vonnegut, apparently put it in one of his books, and I thought, isn't it amazing? Years ago, Kurt Vonnegut, Mr. Spock, was predicting what's happening today. Yeah. Uh, and I thought that's quite perceptive, of them to do that. Kind of like a George Orwell in 1984, a book that he wrote in the late 40s, He predicted exactly what's happening today. Well, even before him, there was another man that predicted what's happening, and his name was Paul of Tarsus, known as the Apostle Paul, because he wrote an epistle, a letter to the Christians in Rome, and there he basically, to me, it's his masterpiece. That's what I think. You know, it's the greatest treatise in explaining the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's almost like an academic uh, paper, you know, to explain what the gospel is all about. And he begins by extolling the beauty of the gospel until he crescendos by saying, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God unto salvation for all who believe, for everyone who believes. And it is a beautiful verse that we should all memorize. But then he goes, and the gospel is the good news, but he starts telling us the bad news. And he says that the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the ungodliness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness. And boy, he really predicted what's happening today, didn't he? You know, that we are suppressing the truth by our wickedness. And that's why this world is getting more and more wicked and insane. And he even describes this descent into madness, what I call the descent into depravity. And he says it begins when the people reject God as the creator. That's the first step. Once you stop believing in God, you reject that He created all things, that He has a purpose for our lives, you know, and that and who He is. Once you reject that and you reject God, this begins the downward slope. It starts slow, and maybe it's just small things stop happening. Maybe like we kick prayer out of the schools and we stop reading the Bible in schools. Reading passages in schools. When I was in elementary school, we used to perform the nativity scene every Christmas, and I look forward to that. In all my 5, 6 years in elementary school, that was my favorite time of the year because we'd gather in the cafeteria. I'd sit on the ground there, and we had everything going on. The star, Joseph and Mary, the shepherds, even the sheep, and the three kings is the one that really rounds it all up. But I doubt if you can do that in a public school today. I don't know. I'm not a teacher, but I would be really surprised if they still did that. But that's what was happening when I was in school. Today we've completely rejected God. And so I grew up to school not believing in Him, and that was the first step. But it began to get steeper because into the 60s, and when I began to go into high school, the morality of at least America began to really dip, and we were declining towards depravity and free sex, free love, and that came on the scene, and then it got worse from there. It's never gotten better. It's going to get worse, and even in the midst of the Jesus movement revival, which swept me into the kingdom. That's when I came to Christ about 50 years ago, and even in that time, America still legalized abortion. The Supreme Court basically made it legal in the entire country. So even though we had these bright spots, the decline into depravity continued. Well, it goes further down, and we have in this century, we've had gay marriage, the acceptance of gay marriage, and we've legalized that, and we've gone way beyond that. I'm not going to mention more, but if your eyes are open, you know where we are now. We were way beyond gay marriage, and we're not almost, we are basically into child abuse stage already, and we're to me, we're past Sodom and Gomorrah. That's my opinion. I'm surprised the fire hasn't fallen down from the skies even now. But that's not even the worst of it, Paul says, because Paul finally shares the most terrible judgment that God can give us, more than this slide into depravity. The final step, and this is the final step he mentions, is that God gave us over to a depraved mind, or as some versions put it, to a reprobate mind. And that's kind of a odd, nebulous term, a reprobate mind. And you might be asking, well, what the heck is that? And so let me show you this definition I found on the internet, in of all places, Wikipedia. And there it's written, in Christian doctrine, when a sinner is so hardened as to feel no remorse or misgiving of conscience for particularly vile acts, it is considered a sign of reprobation. That's what it is. It's basically when you come to the point that you cannot even discern right and wrong anymore, good and bad. And like I said, light and darkness, truth and lies, it just goes all out the window. And your mind is so reprobate that you lose your ability to discern what is right. And when you come to that stage, then you're on the bottom. And there's nothing left if you continue reading in Romans chapter 2 except the wrath of God stored up for destruction of this civilization. And we are like at the brink right now, because I can see that we are at the bottom, and the reprobate mind is like an epidemic among us. And that's the craziness that we sense. Um, Let me show you something else that Paul reviews in 2 Timothy chapter 3, because it tells us kind of like a time stamp on what's happening. He says in Revelation chapter 3, starting at verse 1, in the last days, this is how he begins that chapter. He continues that and he says, in the last days, perilous times will come. Now, the word he uses for last days is the superlative of the last days. You have the last days and you have the last days. The last days to me began when Jesus ascended to heaven, and he left the church to fulfill his duty, to fulfill the Great Commission. But the last days, the superlative of the last days, is the final years or months or days, weeks before his return, at the very end of the last days. And that's what this is referring to. In that final last days, he says, perilous times will come because people will become, and he gives a litany of descriptions. They will become lovers of self, lovers of money. By the way, think in your mind, do I know anybody like this? Boastful, proud, blasphemers. They speak out against God, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, without love for what is good, traitors, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to the form of religion, but denying its power. In other words, its power to change our life. We go to church, but there's no difference in how we live. A lot of talk, but no walk. Led along by a variety of passions, always learning but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. They resist the truth, men who are corrupt in mind, worthless in regard to the faith. Now, can you think of anybody that has these qualities? And you're probably saying, oh yeah, Kenzen, my boss, because a lot of people in authority, whether in society, in our workplaces or in our families or in the community, have these traits. But even more than that, people in our government, especially people that, are attracted to the positions of authority, they have these traits. And I call these people are as sociopaths. And I think a lot of people in our government are sociopaths. Now, there's another word we use for people like that. We call them psychopaths. And what's the difference? Well, I just learned from a YouTube video actually that a psychopath is someone who's born like that. He's born without a conscience, without an ability to discern the right and the wrong, and having the discretion to know how you treat people and things. He's born with that. It's like he's broken. Something inside of him is broken when he first comes into this life. And so he grows up to be a psychopath, like the ultimate psychopath, the superlative psychopath, Hannibal Lecter, where he's a very smart guy, and he's very manipulative, and he can be very charming even, you can see how he tries to manipulate Starling, the FBI special agent, but he is evil personified. And that's what a psychopath is. They tend to become serial killers and horrible people. And I've met these people in my life, and some of them, again, were my bosses. Uh, but then a sociopath is similar, but they're different in that they're made, not born. They become sociopaths through their upbringing, through their maybe the parenting was not right, and there's a lot of harshness in that, or the way people treated them as they were growing up. It just hurt and harmed them and broke them in some way, and they become sociopathic, or maybe they're trained to be a sociopath, like when you join the army or the Marines or these military positions where you're going to have to shoot somebody that's maybe only 10 feet away from you, and you cannot hesitate. So when you go to basic training, they teach you how to kill. And if you've ever watched the movie Full Metal Jacket, you can see this brainwashing, this molding. It's almost like operant conditioning, the B.F. Skinner kind of stuff, to teach people through repetition and reinforcement and punishment how to perform as a soldier, so that they can just kill people. Uh, that Full Metal Jacket movie, it shows it so well. And in fact, that drill sergeant was so good at it. One of his recruits was a really good guy. He comes in and he's very, gentle and humble and sensitive to people, but he turns into this monster. And if you haven't seen the movie, go ahead and watch it, because you can see how a person becomes a sociopath and becomes evil personified. Well, this world is kind of like, becoming like this, because it's almost like an epidemic that we are living in an age of the sociopath or even the psychopath. And that's what's making it really crazy and dangerous even, because now we're not even sure, of strangers and how they're going to react if we say something wrong, we use the wrong pronoun, we say something else that's wrong, and we just get inundated with accusations and slander and just criticism. So it's like walking on eggshells all the time. This world has gone crazy. And let me show you this montage of pictures, for this one first. Here we have the lovers of selves that Paul brought out. This kind of stuff wasn't around until just recent years, because before, when people took pictures of the beautiful surroundings of wherever they were or where they traveled, they would take out a camera and then they would take a picture of the scenery. Occasionally, they might hand it to a stranger and say, "Could you take a picture of all of us?" And you bring your family in the picture, or your spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, and then you have them take a picture of you. But not normally, But today, if you take a picture of something you like, you got to be in the picture, it seems. The ubiquitous selfie. People just lovers of selves, look at me, look at me, look how exciting my life is, and I'm gonna make you jealous because I'm traveling all over, I'm eating this beautiful food at this restaurant, and it gets sickening afterwards, because people are so full of themselves. Something is wrong, something is broken in us, that we have to be like this. But then this is another thing that's really wrong. We're just becoming immoral. Here you have a drag queen coming and speaking to these children in a library or in a classroom, and they just had a rally, and this is what they were chanting: "We're here, we're queer, we're coming for your children." You know, this is like a threatening statement, right? I used to be involved in SDS movement on campus, and we would say not these words, but something like this, pertaining to the Vietnam War, and we would make these statements. But this one right here really caught my attention, because I thought, and if my kids were young like this again, I would probably pull them out of the public schools, because I don't want them to be exposed to this kind of stuff. But here in this setting, here are the parents standing up in the back in full agreement and support and compliance to this kind of thing. Our world really has gone crazy, because there was a day when children were the epitome. We're going to guard our children no more. The world has gone crazy. Here's another crazy thing: the looters that we see nowadays. We have these mobs go breaking into the malls and into these really ritzy stores, and they just start loading up their trash bags with all these expensive things. Well, this one right here isn't, it's just a 7-Eleven, I think, in this picture. But I've seen them on YouTube just going in and just taking, thousands of dollars worth of things, and nobody stops them. That's how crazy our world has become. And to tell you how crazy it's gone, Hawaii, we never saw this in Hawaii, but we just had our first case a couple weeks ago where these guys went into Home Depot and started stealing these really expensive equipment, and they just walked out. Nobody stopped them. The store allows them to leave. They don't want their employees to get hurt. But you would have never seen this, 10 years ago. You might have seen the video of the local Samoan girl in Hawaii. When somebody tried to steal from her store, she confronted them and just took them down, basically. But no more, not anymore today. This is the craziness. And then this final one I wanted to show is people code cracking people on the street. And here's this girl walking, and this guy just nonchalantly walks by her and winds up and you know, just punching her and in the face, and she goes down like a heavyweight fighter. And probably gets injured hitting the concrete ground. And instead of running away in fear, fear that somebody might come after him, they just usually nonchalantly walk away. Nobody stops them. Nobody confronts the people. That's how crazy our time is. Our world is, the violence, the brutality. It's as if our world is like this guy, shaking our fists at God and saying, we don't want to live your way, God. We don't need you. We don't want you. We don't believe in you. Get out of our lives. And Job actually explains this in Job 15:25, where he says that this man is shaking their fists to the Almighty. And this picture describes that. But this is the way our world is today. It's crazy. Now, when I saw this and I thought, what the heck went wrong? Why like a switch, a crazy switch. Somebody just flipped it, and all of a sudden our world is insane. Well, it drew me back to this event. And if you've been a Christian for a while, you might remember this, that about 6 years ago, and even longer than that, it became the craze because the years leading up to this, there were so many videos on YouTube explaining this and saying that what is going to happen up in the stars and the sun and the moon is a reflection of this vision that John had. And when I studied and read Revelation 12, and I read his vision in verse 1 of chapter 12 of Revelation, I just thought, yep, it's amazing vision he had. It's something that happened 2,000 years ago that he saw this vision, and the events described in chapter 12 probably happened before that as well. I mean, to me, it was something way in the past. But then this event occurred, that somehow in the heavenlies, like John said, a great sign appeared in the heavens. And it's strange, but in the year 2017, September 23rd, the alignment of the stars, the planets, the sun, and the moon seem to describe exactly what John was describing in Revelation 12:1. If you want a description of it, then go to YouTube and Google, or not Google, but search for this phrase right here, and you will see a plethora of videos that these video creators describe this formation. So I'm not going to spend time because it's going to take too long. But this is how it affected me. Um, this vision right here, was something in the past. Something that was way thousands of years ago, and so there was no relevance to me. But then when it appeared just 6 years ago, this brought it into my present. Like, if this is the Revelation 12 sign, then what the book of Revelation chapter 12 is saying maybe has relevance to us today in our generation. And it's telling us something. Because if you go into scripture in Genesis 1, the writer of Genesis says, God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs, for seasons, and for days and years. But this word signs in the Hebrew is talking about a signal, like an alarm, when you see a certain formation in the stars and the sun and the moon, it's like a signal God is sending us, flashing lights, like the sign on the side of a highway, to exit in 5 miles. He's giving us a heads up. And that's what this word kind of means. It could also mean an omen, of portending of bad things, evil things. So I'm looking at this, and we're thinking, could the Revelation 12 sign in the stars, could they be a sign that God is sending us? This isn't unprecedented because 2,000 years ago, he sent this star. And then Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star, his sign in the east, and have come to worship him." Yeah. They were in probably Babylon or like Iraq, Iran area, and they looked at the western horizon and they could see this star that stayed on the horizon instead of orbiting through their, through the canopy of stars. It stayed there, you know. And so they got on their camels probably. They actually got gifts because they had been told from long ago, maybe even from Daniel, who maybe had a revelation from God that before Messiah shows up, you remember the 70-week prophecy of Daniel is all about the coming of the Messiah, at least the first coming. Well, perhaps God told him, and when he comes, when he comes, I'm going to put a sign in the sky, a star that people will see. So perhaps he had passed that on, and the Magi in the east saw this. They knew a king was born in Israel, and so they began to make their pilgrimage to that king. Well, the star was the sign for them. But then, how about his second coming? Well, Jesus was answering the question by his disciples, what are the signs of your coming again, your second coming? And Jesus said this, that there will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. Okay? This is part of his Olivet discourse. And so Jesus told us, yes, there will be signs and a signal, an alarm given in the heavens to alert you to my second coming. And so there is evidence that this sign right here that was in the sky, this is the Revelation 12 sign without the drawings. This is Virgo, the constellation Virgo, with the sun and the moon at her feet, the planet Jupiter in her womb, and this is Leo the lion, another constellation of the Jews called it the Mazzaroth. Today we call it the thing that people do, astrologers. We call these constellations as part of the astrology, um, astrological signs. But this is actually made by the Jews. Had a entire story explaining all the constellations in the astrological signs, and it explained the gospel. Going back to what Paul was saying. Well, along with this sign in 2017, 1 month earlier, there was this sign. It was a total eclipse of the sun. And they called it the Great American Eclipse because in 2017, when that sign appeared, it streaked across the mainland. In Hawaii, we call this the mainland, but the 48 contiguous states, it went coast to coast from Oregon to South Carolina in 2017. But the amazing thing is next year in 2024, there's going to be a second one, a repeat, total eclipse coming up from the south through Mexico, Texas. So this goes from southern border to the northern border out through Maine, the New England states right here. Now, if you search on YouTube and look up Mark Biltz, not Blitz, but Biltz, if you look him up and you ask about the eclipse, the Great American Eclipse, he has a video where he goes through this. And when you see this X appearing on the surface of the earth or on a map, it could mean one of two things. Either there's buried treasure right here, this is what the pirates do. Indiana Jones says X marks the spot because he was looking for the Holy Grail in that film. Or when you have an X on a map, it could mean this is the bullseye. This is where the artillery pieces or the missiles should be, set for to explode right here. Now, I suspect this might be the latter, that our country right here, talking about the craziness and the descent into depravity, America leads the charge on that. And I just am concerned that these eclipses are a sign given by God, giving us a warning for us to repent as a nation and turn to Him, and confess our sins. But when you reach the this last stage of these the descent into depravity, your mind is all shot. Basically, you cannot discern right and wrong. So even though you see this, it doesn't register. And now the concern, and you can see this in Mark Biltz's video, that this area is called Little Egypt of all things, and he will explain it to you. But Egypt is especially noted in scriptures as the land where God poured out his wrath because the Pharaoh wouldn't let his people go. If you've seen the movie Ten Commandments, you know all about that. But that's what Egypt represents, and this area is called Little Egypt. So is God sending us this signal and a message that you guys have been weighed in the balance, as Daniel's book says, and you have been found wanting, and therefore this judgment of God is coming our way. That's how crazy our world is, that we have seen this sign. And again, like I said, when this appeared in the sky, the picture of John, of the woman and the red dragon and stuff, that was really long ago. In fact, the Christians that interpret that as something that's already been fulfilled are the preterists. But there might be something to this future fulfillment, besides preterism. You can believe some of these things was fulfilled before, but are these other things in chapter 12 of Revelation, are they about to be fulfilled? Okay? And they also explain, like I said, why this road is so crazy. Well, when I see this in the sky, when I saw this, it was like a bugle that was blowing. In fact, this beautiful painting illustrates one of my favorite events of the year. Every May, I watch the Kentucky Derby on Saturday. And we get it live, of course, now. I remember when they first showed the first live football game in Hawaii. It was back in, I think, around 66. I'm not sure. But now we can watch all these events live. And I love the Kentucky Derby because of the traditions. The bugler comes out, da, 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 da. Everybody dresses up like they're at Ascot Fair in England. Beautiful hats, mint julep in their fingers, sipping on that. And they get together and they sing Stephen Foster's classic "My Old Kentucky Home." I'm not from Kentucky, but I still, it's very nostalgic to hear that song, because when I was in elementary school, we used to sing all those songs by Stephen Foster. I'm not sure if they still do it today, but I love those songs as well. But this picture is showing an event in the race. That's my favorite event, and that is the horses coming around the final bend, because as they all lean into this turn, and all these jockeys begin to pull out their whips, and they're waiting for the final sprint. The announcer, the guy that's usually calling the race, he will utter these words, and I look forward every year to hear these words. And down the stretch they come, because he's announcing that we are coming to the last few hundred yards of this race. And if you're going to win it, you're going to have to win it right now. And this is when they tend to spread out and find an open lane to try to sprint to the front of the field and pass that pole first. Well, this sign right here, in fact, you can say both of these signs, but especially this one right here, it's almost like God giving us a signal. And down the stretch they come, because the things that he prophesied, the things that Paul mentioned, that the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven. And in chapter 2, he says, and God has stored his wrath for the day when we finally have reached the fruit of our reprobate mind, and society is so wicked and ungodly that the only solution at that point is for God to pour out his wrath and to destroy, perhaps here, to destroy that community because of their wickedness, that he's going to pour down his wrath. Well, that sign in Revelation 12 is like this point in the race. We've gone through 2,000 years, like 2 minutes of this race, and as we come down to the waning seconds, down the stretch they come, we are in the straightaway. So if you've been waiting for Jesus to return, we're on the stretch. We're on the straightaway. And there isn't many days and weeks and months and even years before he does come. Why? Because this sign has appeared. I really believe that. And that the time is coming short. So with that, let me just say that if you want to know the why, why are these things happening? Why is our world going insane? Then I encourage you to go to part 2. I'm going to have a link right here, and it's going to take you straight to this lesson. We're going to go through Revelation chapter 12, and I'll explain to you the why of this crazy world. Not only that, but at the end, I want you to stay for the end because I'm going to explain to you your part in God's solution for this crazy world. Every one of us as believers has a part to play in the solution that God has given us. In fact, Paul mentioned it in his epistle to the Romans. It is the gospel of Christ, and our part is to spread this gospel and to make disciples. And I'm going to show you how you can get involved. A practical way. It's not going to cost you anything. If you have a computer and I'm going to show you how you can use your computer to basically become a publishing company to get the gospel out, and you will become a discipler of men, and it's going to be to your benefit, because when we stand before Jesus, he's going to ask you, now, what did you do with my gospel? What did you do with my word? And I'm going to show you at the very end of the next part 2, how you can get involved so that when you stand before Jesus, you don't stand empty-handed, but he says, well done, good and faithful servant. So meet me there, part 2. Click on this link right now, and I'll meet you there. With that, I say, Aloha no, God loves you. Ma'alama pono, you take care. Amen.